Hello, I am Curled Up Armadillo, and this is my descent into horror and getting on BookTube video. It all started when I watched the 2017 movie adaptation of It, and I thought, how did Stephen King write this? How did he get this movie in book form? Or what does the movie look like in book form? I got really interested in the book itself and how does someone write that? So I read it, well, a bit of it, because I got it here and I didn't get very far because it was, for my taste, a bit too thick and bulky and a lot of words that weren't necessary. So I DNF'd it, as I've learned in the short time that I've been on BookTube. But my interest was awakened in the horror genre and I started buying more books. I was curious how Dutch authors went about in the horror genre, so I came across the book Hex by Thomas Oldeheuvelt, and I thought it was a really cool concept with the witch and that she just moved about in the village. But I did not like how it was put on page. I thought it was really bad. There were a lot of sentences like, but he didn't know what was around the corner. Or, little did he know that everything would turn out differently. And all of those sentences never ever got their conclusion. It was just useless, empty, ooh, kind of stuff. Although I'm doing this from memory and it's been a while since I read it, so I might be wrong. So I started researching horror and reading more horror, buying even more books. And on Writing by Stephen King, he says Pet Sematary is his creepiest and scariest book he's ever written. So I read that and I was hugely disappointed because it wasn't scary and it wasn't that gross. I didn't freak out. I don't know. It says here on the side, iconic terror. But what makes it iconic terror? I also read Danse Macabre, a little bit, again, by Stephen King. And I read this sentence in it. A good horror story is one that functions on a symbolic level, using fictional and sometimes supernatural events to help us understand our own deepest real fears. So that's what horror is about, I guess. And I've searched a bit about what my own fears are, especially fears when I read about them. Not like you could put a gun to my face and I would be scared, but if I read about it, I'm not scared because I've seen it a million times in a movie, I've seen it a lot in books, and it's just not scary. So there's a difference in fear for your own life and in real life and fear when reading about something, I think. I also came across classics, I think, like Ghost Story by Peter Straub. Sorry, my long fingers are in the way. Ghost Story. And Hell House by Richard Matheson. And they were okay, but I still didn't get what horror was. I just couldn't figure it out. What did something make horror? The best book that I've read so far is this book by Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House. I like the book a lot because it also plays with the idea that people themselves are scaring themselves. And that's exactly what I did when reading the book. I just scared myself with it. So I found that really interesting, and then I sort of became a fan of Shirley Jackson. I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle by her, which is also a great book. I've also read Life Among the Savages, and it's not horror, but it's amazing. It reminded me of a stand-up comedian we have here in the Netherlands called Brigitte Kaandorp. And she always has these weird stories about her family when she's on stage and just people who she comes across. And Life Among the Savages by Shirley Jackson is a book about her family life. And it has nothing to do with horror or why she writes horror or why she even writes. It's just a great book. After reading those books, I started to doubt my interest in horror because I just didn't connect with it for some reason, and I can't put my finger on it, or I couldn't put my finger on it. Then I came across Where the Nightmares Come From. It's this book, The Art of Storytelling in the Horror Genre, edited by Joe Meinhardt and Eugene Johnson. And I came across an essay that was interesting. It's called Horror is a State of Mind by Tim Wegener. And it says, one of the biggest mistakes beginning horror writers make is to write their stories from the outside in. What I mean by this is first they develop the dark thing, the person, entity, place or situation that will serve as the primary conflict for their tale. Then they try to create a character who will encounter the dark thing and be horrified by it. He says, write from the inside out. First create the character and then think about how the character responds to situations. And that's when things started to click for me, because when I think back about the books that I read, I don't really remember the characters. No, that's not completely true. I remember that one character who likes books a lot in It by Stephen King, and he goes to the library to get more books, which I really liked and was nice and sweet. The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, I remember the easily scared woman, which goes to climb a tower or something. I don't remember really. But all the other horror books, I just missed the characters. Just connecting to the people that I read about. And I think Tim Wegener is right that a lot of the books that I've read, all those writers, probably, I don't know, but it seems like they went from the outside in. So I went on YouTube to search for even more books, and that's when I came across Jason White from Jason's Weird Reads and his top 10 horror books and another top 10 horror books. And I haven't read a single book yet from those lists, but I want to thank him very much for mentioning BookTube in one of his videos, because that opened a lot of new doors for me, and I didn't know people were talking about books on YouTube. I've noticed that I probably don't sound very positive about the horror books that I've read, but it's been very interesting, to say the least. And I also came across my little box of cards. It's this little horror card, and in it I came across one card that says biggest causes of evil, and then I quoted from a book. The two biggest causes of evil are two that we think are good and that we try to encourage in our children: high self-esteem and moral idealism. And at the back of the cards I always write down from which book it is, and sometimes even a date, and this one has a date, and it's from the 20th of May 2019. So it's been a while, my complete descent into horror, and I'm still not done. Yeah, I'm still not done. Oh yeah, the quote is from this book, uh, The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt. And I also want to show you this book, which is very interesting if you are interested in evil, inside human violence and cruelty by Roy F. Baumeister. I haven't completed it, but it's a new look for me at least to go into a person's state of mind instead of, well, it's actually what Tim Wagner says. It's going from the inside out. Just what are these violent people about? Why do they do what they do? I think it would be interesting to learn that and then maybe create better stories, better horror stories. And yeah, that's about it.